Hidden Gems, episode 53, in honor of Klaus Teuber. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Jason.
And this is Bill.
Welcome to our show.
Welcome back, folks.
Yeah, glad to be back. Took a little hiatus with all the house stuff going on. I'm back.
Good to have you back. Bill and I are super glad that you're here because before you walked up, Bill and I were getting into some really super deep philosophical conversations. We almost started fighting with each other and throwing things.
I walked into some deep waters here.
Oh, yeah.
Good conversation, though.
No, it was good.
Important things.
Absolutely. It was.
So, maybe someday on a backstage episode, we'll dive into some discussions on absolute morality and,
Right.
and
truth
and
Right.
deep social topics.
Here we go. Jonathan Haidt and the Moral Matrix.
Because I'm sure all of our listeners want to hear more about all that stuff.
That's awesome. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Bill goes to a group on Monday nights called Pub Theology, and he just gets fired up whenever we start talking about this kind of stuff.
Dude, you know that's a national group, Pub Theology is.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
I thought that was just your local thing.
Well, we have a local group that gets together, but they publish a list of questions and current topics for people to talk about and then pose theological questions for you to deep dive into as part of your discussion.
So you're like a local chapter, like the Masons.
Almost exactly like the Masons.
We're a fraternity.
No. Well, we've kind of segmented ourselves off, and we're coming up with our own questions because we had somebody that was like, "These questions suck this week." so we kind of divided up and come up with our own theological discussions. It was awesome. Yeah, it's absolutely awesome.
Cool. Well, what else have you been up to lately, Bill?
Oh gosh. Well,
you always have fun off the beaten path topics for us to discuss. So.
Well, before I get into that, Hidden Gems has so many unsung heroes, and I wanted to call out Ghidorah because he is actually, working on Discord and the BGG Guild and putting his stuff out there, and I totally appreciate that. Well, I was reading through what he said about my comments last week, and it was like, Bill ate a roadside peach. As part of my banter, and it's like, okay, Bill, it's time for me to up my game as far as what I'm going to say. So, now I'm looking forward to what Ghidorah writes about this one, and that we're going to end a temporal thing because now Ghidorah's going to write. Bill talked about Ghidorah talking about Bill eating a roadside peach. Anyway,
Warped reality.
That's definitely going to happen now.
Right. So part of that is to kind of segue into this fever dream thing that Chris recommended to me.
Are we going to talk about this?
We are going to talk about this.
Sweet.
Yes, the Miracle Man graphic novel that Chris
sir.
loaned me. Has it been a month? I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah. Chris tried to get me to read this too, and I gave it back to him a month later, and I hadn't read any of it. But that's not because I didn't want to. It was more because we moved, and I didn't want to ruin it.
Miracle Man is a bit of a commitment.
It is absolutely a commitment. It's a commitment on different levels. Because when you first open it up, it is written in the Golden Age era comic style. Yes. So you're just like, here I come to save the day kind of thing. And that lasts, 30 pages maybe? Something like that. It's a long time. And it's like, what the heck is going on here? And Chris is recommending this to me. And then it kind of transitions into, I guess, more modern era stuff. And I don't even know how to describe it because I'm not a graphic novels person, and I really enjoyed my life when I was giving Chris a really hard time about graphic novels.
Yeah, this is like your first foray into that medium, right?
Yeah. And so what
I picked this one specifically because of that, because I knew I had to get it right on the first one, right? I thought this was a good one to go with.
Well, I'm in the process of appreciating the fact that graphic novels are really a medium unto themselves. So it's like there's just nothing you can compare it to. Because part of it is, I think your imagination process. When you read a book, you are fully free to imagine what they're telling you, right? When you're reading a graphic novel, there's a lot of information that are in the pictures that are on the page that you have to kind of absorb. That it takes your imagination out of it, and you kind of have to intellectually process it.
Yes.
And again, with the text. And with the text part of it, your imagination is engaged, and kind of just incorporating those two together as you go through is almost becoming like a learning process for me as I'm reading it. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but it's just kind of wild in a way that I did not expect as I'm going through it. I'm not to the end of it. I would recommend Miracle Man just because it really is kind of this fever dream of an adventure.
It's very much a fever dream. I'll give a short synopsis if you don't mind, Bill.
Oh, are you going to give me spoilers? Because I'm not done.
It will not be spoilers.
Okay.
No, this is just to give the people an idea. So Miracle Man was written in the 80s, and it's a highly influential graphic novel. I should note right off the bat, it's very mature. Okay, so this is for mature readers only. like Bill said, when you read the first 30 pages, it looks like it's written for children. That's done very intentionally, okay? So Miracle Man is basically a Superman analog. He's Superman, but they just don't call him Superman. They call him Miracle Man.
Right.
And an event happens in his golden age past where he forgets who he is and that he's Miracle Man. And this isn't really a spoiler to say this because this happens early, but he remembers again that he is a Miracle Man. And basically, what the book is really looking at is not necessarily like an adventure of Miracle Man. It's really pursuing this idea of the Übermensch, which is a philosophical idea of if the Superman actually existed, how would he change things? And what would life look like if there was actually a Superman? How would he change worldviews? How would he change the government? How would people's relationships, specifically his wife, this is explored pretty extensively in the graphic novel, how would she relate to him? Because we see Superman and we just treat him like Superman, just like a normal person. But if there really was somebody like Superman, you would not treat him like a normal person. He would become godlike, right? And so the story takes a very deep dive into that ideology, which I think is very fascinating, honestly. It's a super interesting read.
It is. I will say that there are parts of it where it kind of translates into this, how will I call it, high comic book English, which I understand why they're doing it, because they're trying to create this grandiose feeling about it, but they will use some $10,000 words when 10-cent words would do kind of things. But it's still, I don't know, it's part of the atmosphere, I guess, which is kind of cool.
It's written by Alan Moore, and he writes excellently, I think, in a very dramatic style, especially when the battles, quote unquote, get ready to occur. It's very, can maybe argue it's overly dramatic at times, but I just love the way that he writes, honestly.
No, it was very funny. And I have one more thing to talk about. So Steam had a sale, and one of the things I've been looking at for a while was like 75% off, and I bought Desperados 3. Have either one of you heard of Desperados 3? No. So it's one that's like 9.5 ratings, but it's like on sale for $10. And I picked it up, and it's a real-time stealth kind of Metal Gear Solid set in the West. And I'm not really a big fan of old-timey West at all.
Me either, really.
I didn't think I would necessarily like it.
But I love Metal Gear.
Oh, gosh. Then you would absolutely love this. Because it kind of goes through, it's going through every cliche spaghetti Western that you've ever seen, but with a Metal Gear Solid sort of thing. Your guy, his superpower really is throwing a knife. And so he can throw it from afar, or he can dispatch somebody up close with a knife, and you really need to, take care of the body and dump them in the sagebrush or over the cliff or something.
Are you going to get the exclamation point?
Boink. Yes, you absolutely do. Or if you get the exclamation point, you escape, then they're going to put people on patrol, right? Which is very Metal Gear Solid. But it's been really very fun. 2 episodes in, this is a slight spoiler work. There's like a wedding that's going on the edge of a town you just saved kind of thing, and there's a K.E. O'Hara, because like everybody's Irish or Scottish, right? And you basically save her from the wedding because this evil uncle is trying to steal her ranch, sort of thing, and that all plays in the story, which is like in every cliche spaghetti Western. But just the puzzle nature of every section, I guess.
How do I go about clearing this?
How do I clear this? And you can do it with multiple people now, which Metal Gear Solid I don't think had.
No.
Right? They each have different powers to do different things.
Interesting.
And you can give them simultaneous commands. You can stop and then give them a series of commands that they will execute at the same time. And they do it so well. And if you look at the ratings on Steam, and they're all like above 9 or 9.5. And so it's really well. I might bring over a laptop
check it out.
So you can see it out.
Yeah. A recent release?
It's recently on sale. No, I think it's been around for a while. Like it's at least 4 or 5 years, I think.
Cool.
Anyway, that's it. How about you, Jason?
Yeah. Well, speaking of games... I was trying to remember where I mentioned this. I mentioned the game Inscription. I think it was on our backstage. I don't think I actually mentioned it on the episode. But Dylan St. Clair actually chimed in on the Discord because I mentioned it. And I had just started the game, so I didn't have much to talk about. And he actually said this is one of the greatest gaming experiences he's had in like recent years.
I think John from John Gets Games also mentioned Inscription as being really awesome.
Yeah, so...
What platform, real quick?
I played both the games I'm about to talk about on the Switch, but it might be on other platforms as well. So to take a step back, this game is by Devolver Games, which, if you're not familiar, they have a laundry list of amazing games that have come out recently. Talos Principle, Broforce, which you've talked about.
I love Broforce.
Downwell, Enter the Gungeon, Menuet, which we've also talked about.
We talked about Menuet. Enter the Gungeon is a cool game. Hard, but really cool.
The Messenger, Gris.
Oh, I love The Messenger.
Death's Door, which I talked about a while back. Cult of the Lamb. So many good games.
When I've been wanting to check out.
Yeah. But Inscription is... I'm actually not going to be able to talk about a ton of it because there's a lot of spoilery stuff in this game.
Give us a little.
But it is basically a roguelike CCG. So like a collectible card game. I am not a Magic player. I've played it once with you. But it reminds me of Magic in that you're playing cards out to enable you to play more cards out to be able to battle against cards that are on the other side, that type of thing. And basically you start off the game. This isn't really a spoiler, but you boot up the game. And, most game menus have like a new game button and a continue button and a options menu, right? Well, there's a new game button, but it's blacked out. You can't select it. You can only select continue, which you're like immediately starting off. You're
I
like,
love it already.
Okay, that's kind of weird. Like, what's going on here? So you click continue and you enter into your like mid-game, mid-card game in this creepy, spooky like cabin in the middle of the woods across from this masked, creepy guy on the other side of the table. And you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're playing. And so you like slowly figure out what's going on. But there's just so much like from a storyline perspective where they go with it it's weird, but it's crazy. Like I haven't played a game before that does as much wild stuff as this one does. And I can't say much more than that without giving away stuff. But I mean, an early example would be like eventually you realize that, hey, I can stand up from the table and like move around in this place where I am playing this creepy game, right? Just kind of cool stuff like that and different ways of like flavoring this back and forth CCG game that you're playing.
Dang it, you got me, dude.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's very, very creative.
You got me. That was a good hook, man.
So, and if my recommendation's not enough, Dylan said he really liked it too. So, you can take his word for it.
Chris isn't going to tell you, but that's going to be the reason why he gets it.
Yeah.
Probably. You can see how long it took him to play Tunic.
I already put Tunic in my top 10 games of all time. What more do you want from me, man?
But that's actually not the game I was most excited to talk about because I can't really talk about that one a whole lot. But Devolver, again, I picked up another game by them. And I should correct something I said on the backstage. I think I mentioned Inscription in light of Hades. I was saying it was by the same publisher. It's not. Hades is by Supergiant, which is a different publisher. But that is my favorite roguelike game that I've ever played. Fantastic example of it. Anyway, Loop Hero is another game by Devolver that I just picked up. This is a difficult game to describe. It is basically, it's another roguelike, but it is a roguelike fantasy RPG Civ builder. If that makes any sense.
Like Civilization Civ builder?
Kinda. Not really. So every roguelike has a gameplay loop, right? You play the game, you start off woefully underpowered, you go through, you die, you retain something, you go back to the beginning, you start over, you get a little bit further, and so on. So the gameplay loop in Loop Hero is literally a loop. So on the screen, it's like old kind of 16-bit, 32-bit graphics. Every time you start the gameplay loop, you have it's like a top-down pixel grid, like a pixelated road that's in the shape of a randomly generated loop. And the only thing on that road is a campfire in one spot, and everything else around you is black.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And so you have your little pixelated character, and he automatically starts wandering around the loop, right? And then slimes and other monsters and things will pop up on the road, and when he runs into one of them, he'll automatically fight them. So everything's automated, so you're like, well, what the heck are you doing in the game then? Like, he moves automatically, he fights automatically. So where it gets interesting is as you kill enemies, they drop items. So like armor and helmets and weapons and stuff. And all those items have stats. And so obviously like you can equip those things and you're trying to combine different stats and they all do different things. That's one part of it. But where it really gets interesting is that the enemies also will drop tiles. And so these tiles drop down to the bottom of the screen. And they have different terrain types on them. So one will be like a mountain tile, and then another one's like a cemetery tile or a forest tile. And when you drag over these tiles, you can place them out onto the map. So you're building the map as this guy is wandering around it. And different terrain tiles do different things. So some of them go on the road, and they change the terrain of the road. So like a forest goes on the road, and now you have a little day meter that like the time goes by. So every day you get an HP boost, but you also spawns new monsters, right? So the forest tiles spawns rat wolves. So now you don't just have slimes, you have rat wolves popping up. Or you put a vampire house down and it starts spawning vampires. Other tiles go like around the loop, and they affect your stats. Like mountains increase your HP. Deserts reduce the damage that enemies do globally. And so you're trying to pick up all these tiles and add them to the loop to change what enemies and stuff your character is encountering. So now you're probably wondering, like, well, why am I going to add a whole bunch of monsters to the board if that's just making it harder and like more likely for me to die? Well, obviously, the more monsters you have out there, the better gear you get, so you level up faster. But it's also like the storyline is this weird thing where like the world kind of got erased, and you're trying to figure out how to restore order from chaos. It's kind of a weird story, but basically there's another meter at the top of the screen that every time you drop one of these tiles on the board, that meter creeps up a little bit. And you don't arrive at the boss for the level until you've completed that meter.
So it's forcing you.
So you have to add stuff onto the board and make it more complicated for you to get around the loop each time in order for you to be able to reach the boss. And if you don't do that well, then you won't have leveled up enough and you'll just get slaughtered, right? So it's this balancing act of trying to figure out how and when to add stuff to the board, where to add it so that you don't like create a gauntlet for yourself that you can't survive. And like you're adding in different things that give you health boosts versus adding in things that spawn more enemies. It's very cool, very interesting, very different type of game.
I can tell you're super excited about it.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the past couple games that I've had on here to talk about, like Tunic, Inscription, I'm like, it's a great game. Trust me. I can't tell you anything else about it, but trust me. Because it's just so full of spoilery stuff. There's like a tech tree of stuff you can discover that I'm not going to talk about, but like there's not as much spoilery stuff here, so I feel like I can actually talk about it.
It's so interesting because it's definitely roguelike, but the way you're describing it, I could be way off, but it almost sounds kind of like a component of tower defense, but you're the tower and you're moving by the way that you're placing things out and equipping yourself to prevent incoming monsters from killing you. You hear what I'm saying?
Yes, because you have no proactive way that you're actually doing something.
Right.
Except you're also constructing the monsters.
Because you're not fighting.
Right.
How you place things, like that's tower defense.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. But you are progressing through a series of levels.
Right.
And
the towers are moving.
There is a randomization, obviously, to the fighting, right? So, like, your stats for your weapons are a range. Right. So, like, you go into a battle, you can't deterministically know that I'm going to win this battle because I have enough stats. I mean, you can have a good idea or a not good idea, but yeah, very cool.
Man,
fun.
You sold me, Jason. Got me twice.
I was going to say, one of these days I'm going to have to buy a Switch.
Dude, I love my Switch.
I think this game actually was not designed for the Switch because the user interface on the Switch is actually not great. This is the first game that I've ever played on the Switch where I've had to rely on the touchscreen because it actually has a pointer on the screen, right? Like looks like it was made for a mouse. And to like drag tiles onto the board, I use my finger on the touchscreen.
What's it called?
Like doing it with the joysticks.
Loop Hero?
Loop Hero. Okay.
Loop Hero.
I'll look to see if it's on Steam.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's very cool.
All right. Well, that was a really long description.
Yeah.
So I was going to say,
Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, buckle up, folks. This is going to be a long banter.
You only get like
section.
3 minutes now.
Bill got to talk about two things, and Jason talked about two things. So dang it, I'm going to talk about two things. I'm not going to take the high road and just be like, well, I'll just talk about one of my things. No. Talking about two things. It's going to be a little longer today, folks. So Bill and I, besties apparently, we've been spending all this time together.
Oh, really?
Bill and I are on an adventure. Mm-hmm. An undertaking, if you will.
A cooperative adventure.
A cooperative adventure.
Which is crazy for Nemesis.
For me to find co-op games that I like that aren't Hanabi, basically. You know, co-op games are so popular in the board game medium. They really are. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I can understand why people like them. I think there's something appealing about people getting around a table with no pressure of beating each other and cooperatively defeating something.
Right.
I get the appeal. Unfortunately for me, I've just never really found many. Like I said, Hanabi's the only one that I would say I really, really like.
Right.
For several reasons. One being they're either too easy and there was no challenge, or they're too hard to the point that they just feel unfair. like random. And then the other element being the quarterbacking thing, right? One of the reasons I like Hanabi is because there is none of that. And it's really hard to find the right group. And even when you find the right group, it's still hard to resist the urge yourself and the other people at the table to be like, I know you want to do that, but I think that's a mistake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so hard to not do that, right?
Well, and also, when you're playing a co-op game, you don't have necessarily a real intelligence that's against you, right? So it comes down to the randomness as far as the challenge. So it's so hard to design a game that can kind of obfuscate that randomness so that you feel like you get a sense of accomplishment once you do it together. So,
and at the same time still feels fair.
Right.
So we're trying, because I've got a bunch and I need to play them. So Bill and I played 2 recently. We'll talk about them really quickly. So we played the Shipwreck Arcana and we played Castle Panic.
Castle Panic.
2 very different games. So we'll start with Shipwreck Arcana.
I will just say I feel kind of left out.
You're always welcome, man. You're too busy with your house.
Seriously.
Fixing
I'm just
something.
giving you a hard time.
But yeah, whenever you want to come hang out with me and Bill in our newfound friendship. All right, so briefly, what the Shipwreck Arcana is, it's a deduction game. So basically what you're doing is you're drawing 2 tiles out of a bag that's got a number on them, anywhere from 1 to 7. You can have duplicates. Basically what you do is you will take one of those 2 tiles, hidden from the table, and place one of them face up under a row of cards, and then the other one you will have in your hand. What the table is trying to do is figure out the tile that is left in your hand, what that value is, what its identity is, based on the other tile that you played face up to the table. Now, the way they figure this out is when you play it to the table, you can play it under any number of like 4 different cards. And those cards have logic on them. So I'll read just a couple here so you can have an idea of how they work. So one of these cards says, if one of your fates or your tiles is a 1, 2, or a 3, and the other one is not, play the 1, 2, or 3 here. So if I had a 3 and a 7, for example, I could play the 3 under this card, and then the table would know, well, my other tile has to be 4, 5, 6, or 7.
Right.
Now, taking that information in combination with how I've played previously, because you can carry token over from round to round, or what I didn't play under, the table can kind of suss out what they think that I'm holding.
Right.
That's the general idea. I didn't like this game. And it's really unfortunate. And I want you to talk to it too, Bill, because I know you played it. But I really thought I would. This is one of those games that on paper, I was like, this sounds awesome.
Right.
Not a whole lot of quarterbacking here. Interesting deduction, which I really like. But the problem for this game, there were 2 problems with it, in my opinion. One of them was it was too easy to figure out the deduction. We won both times we played this game pretty easily. That's always a red flag. You beat it the first time, and we didn't really even struggle.
Right.
And then the second one was a lot of the times the tile play seemed really obvious, if not forced.
Right.
And actually, when we played it with Ken, our friend Ken Cantrell, he said that of all of his tile plays, only one time did he actually have a choice. Either it was forced or it was so obviously the best move that I just have to put it there because everybody will figure out what my tile is.
Right.
So it was a bit of a downer. What'd you think, Bill?
There were moments where we were thinking through the process of what the logic would be. That was kind of fun. I wondered after we played that. Ken is like a manager of an analytics group in a software design company. So his whole life is about analyzing things. So he was a great person to kind of walk through, okay, well, if he didn't play it on this one because of this, and this. He didn't play it on this one because this, and this. And so
if you didn't play it here and here, and he played it here, then it must mean
here.
That blah, 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 blah.
Right.
You're right. Yeah.
So he just went through that logic tree and lightning speed kind of thing.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some people out there that just don't do that as well. But part of me thinks, would it just be frustrating if you don't do that? If you're not able to do that? Because there wasn't really necessarily, like you're saying, it wasn't a challenge to not win, and or there wasn't. I want to take that back. I think there was room to make a mistake at times, but we ended up winning every time.
We did pretty comfortably, and I didn't mention this, but cards can actually do something called fading, where they flip over and can give you actually a benefit that makes the game even easier. And as a matter of fact, we oftentimes weren't even using those, because we were just figuring it out without them. And again, I thought, this is just too easy. You know what I mean?
The gameplay loop sounds a lot like the Ravens of 3 Sahasri that we played a while back.
Similar, but that game is much better.
Yeah, that game is hard.
Yeah, much better.
Mainly because it's weird.
Very weird. That is another one I like, not as much as Hanabi, but outside of that one, the Ravens of 3 Sahasri and Hanabi, I cannot think of another co-op I like.
Yeah.
Which is a nice segue into our next game, Castle Panic.
Spoiler alert, I guess.
Spoilers. Yeah, I would give the Shipwreck Arcana, by the way, a 2.
Yeah.
I think it's bad.
Yeah.
Which is sad because so many people talk highly about it. I just did not get it.
Well, it would be interesting to play it like 10 more times to see if you find yourself in that situation. Because it was kind of cool that there were some times where, I don't know, there's a positive inference where they put their token on a place that you can say in a kind of an active logic manner that it is this one. But there's also times when you have to understand that they didn't put it on this one and have a negative inference to say, well, if the person who is placing the tile didn't put it here, it must be this. Mm-hmm. And there might be times where you get that wrong, I guess.
Sure.
But
we never did.
No, we never did.
Not saying that we're great or anything.
No,
I'm not saying we're awesome.
It's
too easy.
Implying it. Just a weird flex, as the millennials
That's right.
say.
Okay, very quickly, Castle Panic. Don't look at me, Jason. I gotta talk about my 2 games. Just give me the side eye like we're at like 35 minutes. But
you're fine. Keep going.
Okay, very briefly, because I bet a lot of people play Castle Panic. It's a tower defense game.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Where you have a castle in the center that you're trying to protect from hordes of monsters who are encroaching upon it around the circular ring. You should think of it like a bullseye, a target.
Like Loop Hero?
Like Loop Hero. Your tower is in the center, surrounded by walls. Monsters are coming in from the outer rings, moving a ring at a time. And they're
Orcs and trolls.
Yep, and goblins. They're trying to break your walls down and break your tower down. Okay? That's the general idea. How you combat this threat is through a deck of cards. You're going to take cards. The target is divided like a pizza into 6 sectors, 2 red, 2 blue, and 2 green. So you might draw a green swordsman. So a green swordsman means he can attack in the green sector, and he attacks a monster that's in the innermost ring. Whereas a blue archer can attack a monster in one of the 2 blue sectors that's in the outermost ring. Mm-hmm. And then there are a few other special cards mixed in with that to help prevent them from getting in your tower and breaking everything up. My thoughts on this game. I will say, unlike the Shipwreck Arcana, this game did do a pretty good job of adding some excitement to the game.
Right.
Even if somewhat artificially. So you draw monster tokens out of a bag. Mm-hmm. And some of them are like, add a whole bunch more monsters. Mm-hmm. And if you draw a bunch of those in succession, you can go from, we've got this in the bag, to, holy crap, we are dead.
Right.
0 to 60. Okay. So while that could seem unfair, I will say it got us more interested. Like I remember the game that happened, we were all kind of sitting back in our chairs like we're coasting, and then we all got very focused because it got out of hand really quickly.
Is it completely random, or is it the type of thing where like once those tokens are out of the bag, they're gone?
So once they're out, they're
so
gone.
You're gonna get the same amount of impact. It's just could be distributed.
So we had a guess that they were coming. We had an idea that they were coming.
We just happened to hit a run of them all at once instead of being spaced out, and so we got in the weeds like
that's
real
better than
fast.
It being totally random.
Yeah, we got in the weeds really quick, and so I will say I had fun solving the puzzle of it. But this game does have a quarterbacking thing to it. I mean, when you think, Bill, what'd you think?
Oh, yeah. No, I think it does have that. But I want to say we played with Knox, too, and I want to just make a quick comment. It is so much fun to play with your sons. I mean, I love it when they come in and play games with us, and it just made the atmosphere of it fun just because, you're dealing with monsters and you're defending, and there's a table discussion about trading cards to help, for the next phase thing. And, I mean, I guess that's where quarterbacking kind of comes in. I don't know if we could kind of talk about that a little bit more about just saying, whose turn it is the person who should ask for stuff. Sure. I don't know. But to me, that didn't bother me necessarily as much in the section that we had, just because I did feel like we all had the same goal. I didn't feel like anybody was necessarily dominating, but I could see that happening really easily.
And I think we were pretty civil about it, too. I think I'm always constantly nervous in co-op games like this that I'm going to be perceived as that guy. And so I'm like trying really hard not to. And it's funny, Ken and I were talking about it before the game, and I think I was starting to go down that road a little bit because Ken and I disagree a little bit about how to handle your cards in the game, which I won't go into detail of, but just suffice it to say, we were cooperating, but I was saying, I don't know if I would do that, Ken. And he was like, I think I should do that. And I was like...
Philosophical differences.
Yeah, and we were civil about it, but I don't know. I just feel kind of icky telling people that I feel like they're not playing the way that I would do.
You crazy. What are you
Yeah,
doing? You're going to go.
That's why it's just so hard for me to find one that I like. Because with Hanabi, you just can't do that. I can't be like, Talia, you shouldn't have done this, because I can't see what I'm holding. Right. So the temptation to do that's just not even there.
Right.
And I don't know. Maybe I just don't like who I become when I play co-op games. I don't know.
Come play Nemesis.
But anyway, long story short, it was entertaining. I would say I'm glad I played it, but not enough to keep it. I would give it a 3 on our scale.
Well, it's funny. It's one of these things that makes me think, don't invite Chris to your parties. Kind of thing.
I'm not fun to play with. People. I'm the worst.
Yeah, no, to me, we had
Worse
fun.
than me?
Well, yeah.
You're right. We played one where we won. We played one where we lost, and it was just, like Chris said, we just had, quote-unquote, bad luck, where we had like 3 or 4 in a row that just dumped monsters on us. And I don't think, from a strategy point of view, if we played those series of cards 100 times in a row, that we could have successfully defended the tower from that kind of onslaught. So to me, that's one of the things that is, I don't know. It's
Felt like the game just robbed us.
That, and it's just like, is it a game? Because we could have just tossed a coin at the beginning.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Another thing about co-ops that bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I felt that very strongly in this game. Although I feel like I could play it with my kids kind of thing, and they would probably have fun that we defended the castle together kind of thing. Right. So
there you go.
Did you guys beat it at all?
We did. We won one and we lost one. Or we won twice. We played it 3 times.
Yeah,
we
right.
lost once, won twice.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Well, now that we are 35 minutes into our banter section, Chris, tell us about why we don't have a cocktail in front of us.
Yeah, so we don't have a cocktail tonight.
Slacker.
I'm so sorry, folks. So, in the vein, I'm taking a page out of Jason's book here of home disasters. So, part of the reason why we...
Bill's holding up an I need to pee sign. So
okay, see you, Bill.
Tell them about it.
Don't worry, we'll leave the door opening and closing in the recording. There we go. Okay, so in the vein of home disasters, part of the reason why this episode is a week late is our AC unit had a malfunction. The pan that collects the water overflowed and flooded our downstairs, and we have all this water damage downstairs. So
never fun.
We had to relocate. Thankfully, our insurance covered the cost of a hotel for us to live out of for the last few days, because inside of our house right now, last time I checked, our thermostat was 96.
Yeah, it was a hot one here today. The heat index was over 100.
It was super hot outside. And see, the thing about these fans that are blowing on the spots to try to dry them out, they emit heat.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have a blowing heater on in there, and there are like 10 of them.
Right.
And the guys told us, they're like, you can't live in here. It's not safe. You need to get out.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Bill.
Well, thank you.
How was your pee?
I did not go into the sauna of your house, so it was much nicer than my last pee.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. So yeah, Bill's kicking over his beer cans. Get it together over there, Bill.
Sorry, man. Let me get settled. Right.
So yes, it's like 96 in my house, and I just totally forgot to get the cocktail stuff. So sorry, no cocktail this week.
No worries. So none of your family's here right now?
No, they're all in the hotel.
Wait a minute, did we not decide that we were going to have a bourbon neat?
Yes, I will go get some bourbon after we finish the banter.
Yeah.
Chris will risk the inferno.
I will. I'll go inside, put my own life at risk.
Oh, wow.
All right. Well, thanks for sticking with us if you haven't jumped ahead to the first review yet. I think most people really like our banter, actually, from what I've heard. Maybe. I don't know.
Are we flattering ourselves?
Maybe
Until
a little
this
bit.
episode.
I think people really love listening to us ramble on about non-gamey stuff. Yes. So, anyways, I'll wrap it up here with talking about Klaus Teuber.
Oh, yeah, book report.
Book report time.
It's been a while since we've had one of these.
It has been a little while. So I'm going to do a quick little bio here on Klaus Teuber. So he was born in 1952 in the village of Breitenbach, West Germany. Mm-hmm. As a child, he said that he enjoyed playing with model soldiers, and he had a fascination with drawing and creating maps. So he actually said that when he was a kid in his bedroom, he would take yarn, different colors of yarn, and he would create landscapes like mountains and roads and houses with this yarn, and he would put his figures within that and kind of create these stories or battles or whatever. Which I just think it's so freaking cool.
You're giving me flashbacks to String Railways.
No, not that bad.
That's fine. I mean, I wonder how many kids. I mean, I had a fascination with maps too.
Well, they don't do it. That's what I was saying. It was really kind of like gutting to read it in a way because I was like, man, my kids don't do that. And I wonder how many don't. I did similar things to that. I had G.I. Joes and we built fortresses and stuff. But I don't know. That's just like a level of play that we just don't see a lot anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Just the electronics are too enticing, you know?
Right, yeah.
So now we're sounding like
Get off of my lawn.
Yeah. Anyways. All right, so following school, he began working as a dental technician, but he admitted, and I couldn't really figure out why exactly, but it was very clear from the interviews that I read that he did not like being a dental technician at all. He was very unhappy with his job. And he said that as a way of escape of that, he would go down into his basement and he began tinkering with the idea of game design because he was familiar with games and he started making his own games. So in the 1980s, he designed his first game, Barbarossa, where players are making sculptures out of modeling clay and guessing what the objects represent.
Huh. Like early Cranium.
Yeah, right, like early Cranium. This is actually based off of a series of books that he really enjoyed. He said that he designed the game as a way to help that series of books live on because he was so sad that it was over. He wanted to find a way to immortalize it. And so he actually created this game as a way for that book series to live on. The book series was Patricia McKillop's Riddle Master fantasy trilogy. Do you know it, Bill?
I don't. That's a new one to me.
The Riddle Master.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. So he won the Spiel des Jahres in 1988 for Barbarossa.
Wow.
Imagine being your first design and you win the Spiel des Jahres. And it was not Catan. Catan was not his first design. As a matter of fact, he went on to win the Spiel 3 more times. In 1990, he won it for Edelverpflichtet, or hoity-toity, which we have reviewed on the podcast.
I hate that game.
I like that one.
In 1991, he won the Spiel for Wacky Wacky West, which we are reviewing tonight.
Wow.
Or Drunter und Drüber, as it's known in Germany. And then all the way in 1995, he won the Spiel for Settlers of Catan.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. He began work on Catan in 1991, saying that he was inspired by the history of Viking settlers in Iceland. So his idea for the game was these Viking settlers had discovered this virgin island that nobody had ever been on and how they developed and civilized it, basically. It was through Vikings. He said his biggest breakthrough in the game was the design of the hex tiles for the resources instead of square tiles.
Oh, yeah.
Said it made the game way more robust and interesting. And then the idea that he had for the bartering or the bargaining component, which I think is what most people think about when they think about Catan.
Wheat for sheep.
Wheat for sheep, that's right. Catan's success allowed him to become a full-time board game designer in 1998, which is pretty remarkable because most people can't ever accomplish that, and that's really early to be able to do that. The game has become very famous. A lot of celebrities like Dax Shepard and Kristen Bell talk often about how much they love Settlers of Catan. Mark Zuckerberg, Andrew Luck, who is the quarterback, used to be the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. The Green Bay Packers offensive line apparently used to play it in the locker room a lot.
That's hysterical.
In like the early aughts. It's been on Big Bang Theory, The Cones of Dunshire, and Parks and Rec. It's kind of like a reference to Settlers of Catan.
Yep.
Things like that. It's been translated into 40 languages with multiple spin-offs. There have been Settlers of Catan socks, novels. At one time, there was talk about a movie, et cetera, all that culminating in, as of this recording, 40 million copies sold worldwide.
Right. Star Trek, Settlers of Catan.
Yep. All different kinds of stuff. And that's pretty much his life in a nutshell. He designed more games after Catan, but obviously that was his magnum opus. And he passed away at the age of 70 on April 1st, 2023.
It's impressive.
Yeah. Apparently he was a really humble guy, too. I read interviews where he kind of had like rock star status at conventions whenever he went, and he kind of like shied away from that. He didn't like being treated like a celebrity. He was just a shy guy that liked to hang in the back and not be doted on, if that makes sense.
That does. That's very cool.
Yeah. So there we go.
Cool.
Good book report, Chris.
Book
Appreciate
report
that.
over. Yeah.
I love that.
All right. Well, with all that, why don't we talk about some of these games, yeah?
Finally.
That sounds good. Now, wait a
do
minute. We have to stop for a minute for Chris to go in the sweat house.
Get the bourbon. I'm
Get
going
the
to go get
bourbon.
it right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Then we're going to get into the game, shall we?
Let's do it.
Absolutely. This is the lowdown. When that railroad goes through Rock Ridge, that land will be worth millions, and I want it. I want that land so badly, I can taste it. Just south of nowhere, there's a junction of Mayfair and Rostorf railroads, and the turvy trunk tree line. Springing up from the desert like a tumbleweed lies the eccentric town of Rostorf. Rostorf's shrewd land agent, Guy Dow, has sold all the town, except in the outhouses, 4 times over. Just about a year ago, miners digging in the shadow of Fort Rostorf struck the mother lode. But it wasn't gold, as it wasn't silver. No, my friend, it was just a little spring. Not any ordinary spring. It was a torrent of mind-marbling drink that locals called Wacky water. The water has made those land builders willing to use whatever means they can to claim the few fertile spots in the leftover town. The only thing stopping them is the Town Charter Amendment number 5, which states, and I quote, "No landowner may move or remove any outhouse with a majority vote of the town citizens. One thing's for sure, something is gonna stink in Rostorf. Pretty darn soon." How's that?
That was a very detailed story.
Man. You stayed in character.
I did. I was going to break down into pirate. I knew somewhere in the middle, but I was able to last it out.
Before recording, you said you sound like an Australian pirate, which you did not.
I did.
You stayed on point with the Western.
I did. I didn't go to my Scottish pirate because that's always going to be the thing that breaks into it. But yeah, no, that was good. Actually, that's like how we talked in the mountains of North Carolina, pretty much. So it wasn't a stretch.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I did listen for a Texan accent. I don't know how close I got, but
I would definitely say you sounded more Southwest than Southern Appalachia, for sure.
There you go, from the Asheville man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Wacky Wacky West, or Drunter und Drüber. Published in 1991 by Mayfair Games and Hans im Glück. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 3,593. Designer, obviously, Klaus Teuber. All right. Brief rule summary for Wacky Wacky West. Wacky Wacky West is a tile-laying social deduction game where the players are trying to suss out what buildings are important to their opponents and cover them while preventing their own buildings from being covered. The game board consists of a 10 square by 15 square gridded town. Some of the squares in the town show 6 different types of buildings in 6 different colors, while other squares have outhouses pictured on them. So just save that thought. We'll talk more about the outhouses later.
The outhouses are real important.
They're real important to the people of this town, okay? But let's talk about the buildings again really quickly, because they're important. This is how you score points in the game. So there are 6 different types of building, and each building can be numbered anywhere from 1 up to 5, represented 1 time. So, for example, the red school. There's 1 value red school. There's 1 2 value red schools, all the way up to 1 5 value red school. The reason why this is important is at the start of the game, you're going to be dealt a quote-unquote secret identity or secret building tile. So, for example, I might get the red school card. Nobody knows that but me. That's important because what I'm trying to do over the course of the game is keep those buildings from getting covered up. If my 5 value red school gets covered by a tile during tile placement, I have lost 5 points.
Basically what Chris just said is you'll get a color, and you'll have 6 buildings for those colors. I don't know if you said that exactly, but yes, you'll get a color.
A red school, a white jail,
but
whatever.
A color, right, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to incorporate some theme here, Bill.
Well, no, I get it, but you have 1 color and you get all 6 buildings for that 1 color.
Yeah.
Is yours.
Bill's saying pretty much you're just dragging on too long.
No,
So.
no, it was just a little confusing to me.
I won't have this. I won't have this right now. It's disrespectful. Do not talk over me in my rules explanation ever again, Bill.
I'm sorry, that was not very cooperative of me, was it?
It was not. I'm quarterbacking you to stop talking. All right. In addition to the secret building card, or color, Bill, the players will also receive a preset number of tiles at random. So there are 3 different types of tiles. There are river tiles, there are road tiles, and there are train tiles or train track tiles. And they are of 3 different lengths. So you have a 1 square, a 2-square rectangle, and a 3-square rectangle of all 3 of those different types of tiles. And as I mentioned, you'll get a random number of those dealt to you at the beginning of the game. They'll be face up in front of you. Everybody can see them. A player's turn in Wacky Wacky West is super simple. On your turn, you place one of your tiles onto the board. That's it. That's your only choice. Now you have to decide which tile you're going to place and where, but that's all you do in the game. Okay? So it's important to understand that at the start of the game, there are 4 pawns in the corner of the board. So in 2 opposite corners are where the railroads can start, and then the other opposite 2 corners is where the road will start, and then the other corner where the river will start. That pawn represents the construction crew that's building either that road or that canal or that train track. The reason why I'm saying this and why that's important is because when you lay your tile down in one of those corners, that pawn will move to the end of that tile, okay? Showing where the construction crew currently is. They're at the head of the line, basically. The reason why that is important is what that means is all future tile placements off of that line have to come from the end of that tile where that pawn is. So in other words, you can't retroactively go back along the path and branch off or go in a different direction. Every new tile has to be placed at the end of the tile that was just most recently placed on that line. Okay? Hope that makes sense. All right. So, why are we placing all these tiles? Well, like I mentioned earlier, you're trying to cover up buildings that you might think belong to other players with your placements, while also trying to move the lines away from your buildings so that you don't get covered. So, for example, if I'm red and you're moving towards red, I might want to try to move away from red because I don't want it to be covered. Or do I? Maybe I cover red myself to make you think I'm not red when I really am red, etc., etc.
Sneaky.
We'll talk more about that later. All right, now a quick word about outhouses. So outhouses are really important to the people of the town. If you're going to demolish an outhouse by placing a tile over it, it requires a vote. So normally outhouses are obstacles, but if the town, all the people at the table, vote in the affirmative to place the tile, the outhouse is demolished, and you can just place the tile in that direction. If the table votes no, the tile will not go down. Mm-hmm. The way that a vote works is everybody at the table starts the game with a certain number of cards. They have yes vote cards and they have no vote cards of certain values, and all at the same time you simultaneously reveal. And basically, if the yeses outnumber the nos, the tile goes down. If it doesn't, the person picks the tile back up, puts it in their supply, and the tile doesn't go down. Okay? Mm-hmm. The game ends once all of the players can no longer legally play tiles. At that point, the players reveal their secret building or color, and whoever has the most points showing on their uncovered buildings wins the game. That's generally how you play Wacky Wacky West.
A quick synopsis. This is a little bit like playing the game of Snake, where everybody starts in the 4 different corners of the room and everybody's drawing the snake trying to cover up everybody else's other buildings.
Yes.
So that's a quick synopsis of what's happening in that game.
Look at that. Bill cutting in on your rules explanation
Perhaps
again.
you would like to teach the game next
maybe
time,
maybe
Bill.
I could do it a
You
little
want
better
to
next
just
time.
do all the rules from now
I
on?
was just doing a little summary. That was a great visual, wasn't it?
All those nice things I said about you earlier in the show, I take it back.
Fight, 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 fight.
I don't like you anymore, and I don't want to play co-op games with you.
Oh. I thought that was just, I mean, to me, Chris, I will say I marvel every week at you able to verbally create the image in listeners' minds about what games look like, because that is really, really hard to do. But I did listen, or I read some other reviews about that, and I read somebody talking about it in that way, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what this is. It's the game of Snake, right?
Yeah, totally.
Bill really appreciates that about you, but he also thinks he can do it better.
I think I just demonstrated that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Bill.
Yeah.
But I don't forgive you. All right. So, quick question for Wacky Wacky West. So, it's interesting. We've played quite a few of games like this recently. And I say recently in the last couple of years. I think this type of design was much more popular years ago than it is now. You know, now...
Hidden role games?
Yeah, but not the hidden role games where there's the accusatory yelling like the Resistance style. More of these sneaky hidden role games like Heimlich & Co. Or Fae or Clans. Code of 9, where you know something that other people don't know at the table and you're trying to sneakily work out your scheme.
Right.
We played a few of these now. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question to you would be, maybe you don't necessarily have to compare them to those. Maybe you would want to, but how do you feel like the hidden role aspect in this game played out? Do you think that it worked well, this tile laying aspect of trying to get your buildings to stay uncovered while covering others? How did you feel like that played out?
Yeah, it's interesting in this game because I feel like we got to the end of most games and we're still not 100% positive who was who. Sometimes it was super obvious. Other times it was like, I still don't know who Chris is, right? So I guess that's a good indication that it does work. But at the same time, it felt like, and maybe this is just me being bad at these types of games because we've already proven that with Heimlich and Co. and all the other ones that we played. It felt like it was difficult to not be obvious with it, right? Because of the way the voting works. I don't know if you explained this, but you can throw out a card that is just a I don't care about this vote card. Because if you throw out your other cards, they go away. And you don't get them back. The only card that you ever get back is your no vote card. So that incentivizes players to really only vote on things that actually matter to them, right? And you can obviously vote on things that don't matter to you just to kind of throw people off or whatever. But it means that if you really want to stop something, you kind of have to go all in. Or you have to go in pretty hard with no votes in order to ensure that something doesn't happen, right? And when you do that, you're telegraphing who you are, right? And I mean, I guess there are ways to get around that and like, well, try to redirect the train earlier than that. Like if you sense it's going in the general direction of something you want to protect, like do it a few tiles earlier and not on the one that's like literally covering over your 5 building. But that can be really hard to do because the tracks are really unpredictable. They're wacky, you know, as they say.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I thought it worked out pretty great. The games that we played, I think the winner had maybe 5 or 6 points at the end. So if you're going to lose a 5 building or a 4 building, it is super important to you. And so if you're somewhere in the early part of the game, and this happened in one of our games, where I was faced with losing a 4 building, I had to out myself at that point. And it is very much a blood in the water kind of game. That once somebody knows is like, okay, they're coming for you. It's funny, I think I ended up still winning that game just because of other dynamics, but
everybody came after me. Forgot all about you.
I love it when Chris is at the table.
Complete shark attack. Meanwhile, Bill was just sitting there quietly. We knew Bill was yellow for like the gun. And then Jason and Mike, I think, and I just started cannibalizing each other, and we just totally forgot about Bill.
Which was awesome. Which, I guess we'll get into this later, but I mean, this is one of those games I think you have to have the right kind of people at the table who are going to chatter about that. And so, well, this is so-and-so, and this is so-and-so. It's like, no, that's not me. This is it's obviously somebody else. And that just makes this game, to me, a lot of fun. Just trying to pass the buck or whatever. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I do think there is definitely some opportunities for some interesting deception in this game. You know, it's interesting you just said, you know, well, if the track or whatever is going for my 4 building, I got to divert it away. I can't lose my 4 or whatever. But early in the game, I would argue you probably could, because like you said, a lot of times the people only had 5 or 6 points that won. And I would even argue maybe, what if you had the guts to cover it yourself?
Right.
And that's a game you play with yourself is, if you cover the 1, that doesn't really do much. That might actually even out you as that being you, because, you know, you're not too worried about losing your 1, but do you have the guts to cover your 4?
Right.
You know, to get people off of your trail so that then you can sneakily try to keep your other ones from getting covered up. I kind of enjoyed those mind games of, oh, he laid the track past that building when he could have covered it. Does that mean he's that color? Oh, he covered up this building. He can't be that, or can he, right? So you're going back and forth with all these mental games.
Yeah.
It also gets into these weird mind games of like, well, Chris has the opportunity right now to cover over that that red 5, right? So if he doesn't do that, then what does that say? Right. So
I just think I'll take it the other way.
Yeah, the reverse psychology.
Right. That kind of information comes out in voting for the outhouses, which I think is also hysterical, because that is like a 1, 2, 3 show your votes kind of thing. And that almost always is going to end up with a building being wiped out. And to me, that's a way to out who's who very, very easily. But like you're saying, there's also the opportunity for some tricky deception.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved about the board layout and design was that all the high number buildings are towards the middle.
They are.
So on the outside of it, you have opportunities to play those trickery games, like letting your 3 go or your 2 go or whatever, that can hopefully, you know, put people off the scent.
Yeah. Yeah, one other thing I wanted to toss out to y'all too that I found was interesting was, you know, we talked a lot about the deduction, which is obviously the heart of this game. It's the core of it. But I thought the tile lane was pretty interesting here. So I didn't cover it in detail in the rules, but it should be noted that tiles can't overlap each other. Okay. So you can build across, so to speak, a 3-length tile across a bridge, but for the most part, tiles get in the way of other tiles, right?
Yep.
So they can be blocking in a way. And you can definitely lay tiles in such a way that you can actually kill a line, which I also found to be interesting, because if Jason's got a lot of track tiles and I don't, well, if I kill that line, it doesn't hurt me nearly as much as it hurts them, right? Because I've just taken away track lane or tile lane potential, right? So there's also some opportunities for trickery there of diminishing the value of your tiles or taking plays away from you.
Right.
Or laying a tile in such a way that it can never get back to a building that matters to me because I've killed that line, right? Which I found that to be interesting also.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that. Everybody gets the same number of tiles at the start of the game, but it's randomized what you get. So you could end up with like only 1 or 2 track tiles, right? But a ton of river tiles and a ton of road tiles. What did you guys think about that randomization of the distribution? Because it can really kind of hamstring you a little bit. If people are piling heavy onto the river and you don't have any tiles of that type, you can't really affect it. I mean, yeah, you can try to block it off or whatever, but when you're up against 3 other players potentially who have the ability to manipulate that and you don't, it can feel a little overwhelming.
Well, to me, this is like the filler game category, right? Because you can play this game super fast. Rules are really easy to teach. I mean, there's just a lot of things that just make this a light game. And to me, that just didn't bother me at all. I believe you could end up in a situation where you can't execute on a strategy that you might be able to in another circumstance. But, I mean, if you're, playing it 3 times in a night in 45 minutes, I mean, it just that didn't bother me very much.
Yeah, I think I agree. I get what you're saying. You could get a really rough draw. But again, if you can find those opportunities to kill a line that everybody else has a lot of tiles in, you've just turned that disadvantage into a huge advantage, right? Because now all those tiles they have are worthless, and now you have all the tile advantage. Because if you can get into a position where your opponents can't play anymore and you can play several in a row, because you're the only one that has legal plays left, you can really wreak some havoc at the end. So you can kind of turn it around if it lands right. Okay, some good things. We need to talk about some cons here. I've got some, but I'll throw it out to y'all first. Was there anything that y'all didn't particularly care for in this game?
I will say the only other thing that I haven't mentioned, the random distribution of tiles at the beginning was a minor con.
Sure, right. The
only other thing that I could really call out would be it seemed like, well, just the way the game plays out, there are enough tiles that by the end, as we've already said, generally most of the buildings are covered over.
Yeah.
Right? There aren't a whole lot left. And when it starts to get down towards the end, I felt like it became this game of like, well, whichever color has the most points on the board, that's the one that everyone at the table is going to hammer.
This was one of mine.
Regardless of who owns it. And so it just kind of is this natural leveling mechanism.
Yeah.
Which is good and bad. I don't know. It just felt like a weird conclusion to the game. It felt like almost it would be better if the map was bigger, there were more buildings, or there were less tiles or something, right? Because it kind of comes down to like everybody has maybe 1 or 2 buildings left. If you have 3 buildings left at the end, you've probably won.
Yeah.
And it was probably because you managed to wall something off, right? Otherwise, people were just going to crush you, right? So
I 100% agree with you. I had this written down too. This really weird self-balancing mechanism of groupthink, which I guess makes sense, but it just kind of cheapens the deduction. You do all this work to create this illusion of who you may or may not be, and then somebody's like, well, the white buildings has 7 points and everybody else is at 4 or 5. I don't know if anybody's white, but somebody should cover a white because they're way ahead, and somebody could be white. It just... Right. I really hated that because it just cheapens the deduction, right?
It was really funny to watch you try to convince us all that you weren't blue. When everybody was
sour
like
grapes or anything.
Everybody was like, blue has 3 more points than all the other colors on the table. And Chris is like, I'm not blue. We shouldn't cover over blue. We should cover over orange. We should cover over orange. Orange makes much, like, look how many points orange has. And we're like, no, blue has 3 more points than any other one at the table. Even if you're not blue, we should cover over blue. And you're like, no.
It's dumb.
I totally agree that happens, but you could say part of the game is trying to wall off your building for that stage of the game, for the end game, so that you can't get to the
But even if you do that, let's say I wall off 5 points of red, then everybody's like, well, we got to cover every other red up now because somebody could possibly be red. It was just like a weird... self-balancing thing,
Yeah. I mean, to me, that doesn't necessarily feel like it's a bad thing I get exactly. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it still was kind of fun, especially in the negotiation of it all. It's like, no, that's not me. But yeah.
Yeah. I would say the only other thing for me, and I want to bring it back to the outhouses because I think they're an important part of the game. It struck me as a little bit odd that if you put a tile down to cover an outhouse and it gets voted down, that person gets their tile back. And either they or the next person in line can just put the same type of tile right back down on that path. Because if you vote no,
right,
basically what you're probably saying, unless you're trying to throw people off, but especially at the end of the game where every point matters, this is where I really had the biggest gripe with what I'm getting ready to say. At the end of the game, I have done all this work to keep one or two of my buildings uncovered, and they're trying to cover me over an outhouse, and I vote no, and then the person right after them, or maybe not even that, we're so few on tiles, it comes all the way back around to the same person, and then they just do it again.
Right.
And I can't stop them.
Because you just spent all your no votes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to me, I feel like if you vote to put a tile down over an outhouse and it loses, you should lose that tile. Mm-hmm. That would add a lot more tension, and I think that would prevent your issue you mentioned at the very beginning of the review, Jason, of somebody just laying a tile down just to see what happens and putting down that like question mark vote of like, I don't really care, you're just creating chaos, right? Because if it doesn't pass, you're going to lose that tile, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like the deduction would be a lot more interesting if the risk of losing it was there, and then it gives you a chance to save your no votes to the end and actually save yourself, right?
Yeah. I can see that.
Makes sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah, not to mention that you've just told everyone that you care about that building.
Right.
So they're going to be like, well, of course now we're going to cover over it.
Yeah.
Right.
We ready for final thoughts?
I think so. Bill, you want to start?
Sure. So, this is one of those episodes where I think I've referenced the PC Gamer that I read in the mid 80s where the editor said, I really hate game numbers and I think we should just get rid of them completely because the meat of what a game is really in what we say about it. It's in the editorial part of it because that's the meaningful part of it. Mm-hmm. I'm giving it a 4 because I just kind of live in my rose-colored glasses in the world because I think there's a group out here that will just enjoy it. Mm-hmm. I totally agree that it kind of has that in-game problems, I guess, where, especially when you're playing with 4 people, that a lot of it gets covered over. But I loved playing with Mike, and part of it might be because how much crap he gave Chris at the very end.
Oh, dude.
As far as Chris doing
I
his
was getting
lawyer
absolutely torched that whole game.
Yes, I think if you're playing it with a boisterous group that is willing to interact with each other instead of like a bunch of computer nerds who are just are approaching it with like a really quiet sort of, I'm going to calculate it all out sort of thing and do it all in silence, would be totally 2 different game experiences. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we played with, I think, just a great, very fun group.
Yeah.
And they're willing to say what they're thinking, talk about it, talk it all out, and just made it, I think, what was in Klaus's designer spirit of what this thing should be. And I think if you're in that environment, it could be a great game. So yeah. I'm giving it a 4.
Nice.
It's not called Analytical AP West. It's called Wacky West.
Exactly, Wacky West. So if you're ready to have a wacky time and not invite Chris to your house, this will be a great game.
All right. Yeah, this game is wacky for sure. I kind of align with you, Bill, on this one, to be honest, which is probably surprising coming from me. Mm-hmm. This is the type of game where, because of the determinism at the end and the way that you can kind of suss everything out, I should not like this game. All that said, I think I have to settle on a 3, mm-hmm. mainly because these types of hidden role games where people can just pick you out and throw you under the bus and wreck you just generally don't go well for me. And I think for some of those questions that I had in my mind. But all that said, I was struggling with a 4 for this one because it is fun with the right group.
Right.
And I think that's the key. It's with the right group. If you play this with people who are going to stare at the board and try to analyze every situation and figure out what is the absolute best move here, they're going to figure it out, and then it's going to be drudgery, right?
Right.
But if you're in the wacky spirit, I think this can be a great game. And it's not long. It's dead simple to explain.
Yeah.
So I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, for me personally, I don't think I would go seek this game out. I'm not going to go out and buy a copy of it. So for me personally, that's a 3. But if somebody offered to play this game and it was the right group of people, I would absolutely play it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's short. I wouldn't want to play a whole night of it. But I'd play it once as a filler game. So take that for what it is. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I landed.
Makes total sense.
Totally.
Yeah, so for me, I think you all might think I'm going to give this a harsher review than I'm going to based on my cons of it. I do think this game does have a couple of significant cons that I mentioned, but I agree with you. I had fun playing this game. I think, again, as you both have said, in the right spirit, the game can be a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed the tile laying puzzle of this game more than the deduction part, because I do feel like the deduction breaks down a little bit in some areas based on what we've already said. But it was fun trying to figure out how to lay the tracks in such a way that either the track can't get there or would have a really hard time getting there, and that's good for me, or I kill this line. And so there was enough strategy there to keep me interested as well. Mm-hmm. As mentioned at the top of the review, we've played a lot of these now, like Heimlich and Co., Fae, or Clans, as it's also known, and Code of 9 come to mind. I think this game is better than Heimlich and Co. I don't think it's as good as Fae or Code of 9. I think those games are really great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I gave both of those fives out of 6 on our scale, and I would rather play those. Right. However, having said that, I'm going to keep this game. I'm going to give it a 4. I liked it. I would tell the listeners, if you like this kind of game, if you like these deduction-style games like Clans, this would be worth seeking out to play. If it's a genre that doesn't really do a lot for you, you probably can just skip this one.
Right.
But I'm glad to have it. I enjoyed it. I'm going to keep it. So like I said, I'm going to give it a 4.
Darn it.
Not yours, Bill. You can borrow it whatever you want.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, in that vein, if people do want to check it out, how hard is this one to find?
Not hard at all.
No.
Being a Spiel winner does a lot for you. So this game is available on Noble Night for as low as $10.
I saw that.
Nice.
Yeah. So if you use our discount code, which is GEMS10 off, that's the number 10, GEMS10 off.
It only costs $9.
It only costs $9.
Wow.
Yeah. Or you can order a few more things. So
what was the one last week that was we rated pretty highly? That was also very cheap.
What did we do last week? AVC.
What? No, Caesar.
Yeah, you don't want that junk.
Constantinopolis.
Constantinopolis.
Was that what it was?
Was super cheap. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. It's like $10 also. So yeah, throw that in your basket.
I wasn't even on that episode, and I remember Bill.
So you can get it there. There are also 40 copies on BGG. So no problem getting this one if you want to try it. All right. Those are our thoughts. Wacky, wacky West.
Wacky, wacky West.
Tensions are high across the lands. The royals erect statue after statue while their loyal subjects starve. But this time, the peasants have had enough. There are whispers of a revolution. Calls for an uprising ring out, and the kingdom is thrown into a tumult. Down with the king! Take that, you greedy blue bloods! In Tumult Royale, you play the royals. Round after round, you collect taxes from your subjects in order to build statues of yourself across the country, thereby securing your rank. If you leave enough commodities for the people after taxation, all is well, and you can continue to build monuments to your own vanity. But if you take too much, the greediest of you will be punished. Who will build the most statues and win the game? Remember, the greedy shall rule, but the greediest is a fool.
It's a lesson in capitalism, Chris.
Don't get me started.
All right. Tumult Royale, published in 2015 by Cosmos, designed, of course, by Klaus Teuber, but also by Benjamin Teuber, who I'm assuming is his son.
This is indeed his son.
Currently ranked on BGG, 4,729. So in Tumult Royale, players are ignorant, ignoble nobles, igniting the ire of their people by ignoring their needs, building ignominious statues of themselves throughout the land. I had fun with that.
I was getting ready to say, you just did this today. You said you had no time. All that alliteration, you're showing me up, man.
It is hard to find words that start with ig. There aren't many.
It was well done.
All right. The game occurs over a series of rounds until one player has built all 25 of their statues of themselves somewhere on the board. We only build statues of ourselves.
That's right. Worship me.
Players each begin the game with their 25 statues and a rank card, 1, 2, 3, or 4, which represent the king/queen, duke or duchess, prince or princess, an earl, or whatever
Earlette.
the opposite of an earl is. Actually, it's a countess. An earl and a count are the same. I looked it up, but I had to look it up. These determine turn order. Each round, players will be attempting to steal resource tiles from a face-down pile in the middle of the table, but they have to be aware of the mood of the people lest they find themselves the target of a tumult. At the start of the round, a good old-fashioned spinner is used to determine the people's tolerance for noble robbery, and the spinner will land on a number between 2 and 5. More about that in a second.
I want you to note that he said spinner. So, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I said good old-fashioned spinner.
That's right.
Bill's taking pictures. Come on, Bill. Distracting me.
This was a photographic moment.
You want to distract Chris? Oh, wait, you do.
I'm totally on tilt right now.
All right. Each round, a pile of resources is created and randomized in the middle of the table. All these resources are face-down tiles. Each tile has one of 3 different resources printed on it: bread, stone, or tools. And each tile has between 1 and 3 of these resources printed on it. Several tiles are randomly removed from the pile also and kept face down, so you won't know the exact distribution of tiles that are in the pile.
So 12. So there's like a lot, like a third of them, right?
Bill, are you interrupting again?
No, that's not me. That was Chris's voice.
Bill needs to be cut off.
Some disciplinary action.
And I'm not sure that it's 12 every time, Bill.
Oh, okay. When there's
'Cause
4
it might be
players, there's
different.
12.
It might be different with different player counts, so keep your mouth
I'm
shut.
sorry. This bourbon's good, Chris.
Bill is loose.
But I
as a
didn't actually
goose
read
right
the
now.
rules enough to know if that's true, so. All right, can I continue now?
That was significant. Go ahead.
All right. A 20-second timer is used, during which players may, using one hand only, that's important, pick up tiles, look at them, and then either place them back face down on the table or take them and place them in front of themselves. Once the timer runs out, the remaining tiles are revealed, and if any of the 3 resources does not have a number of symbols remaining equal to or greater than the number that we got on the spinner, there will be a tumult
People
over
are
that resource.
pissed.
People are angry that the nobles have stolen too much bread. The player or players who took the most of that resource lose all but their lowest valued tile of that resource, which is pretty punishing. And they must lose 3 followers. What are followers, you ask? Players begin with 15 of these, they're little tokens, and they're basically a currency used each round to determine the turn order for the following round. More on that in just a second. Before that turn order shuffle, however, players will build statues. So there is a randomly built board comprised of tiles that have a square grid of spaces containing different terrain types: pastures, mountains, forests, villages, etc. Each player begins the game with 1 statue on a pasture space somewhere on that board. Players must normally build statues in spaces adjacent to where they already have a statue placed. However, there are exceptions to that rule. Placing on different terrain types has different costs of bread, stone, and tools. There are some combinations of these that allow players to build in a space that's disconnected from their other statues, but these are more expensive. There are also spaces, villages, and castles on which a player, if they build there, gets to immediately place 2 or 3 statues instead of just 1. Players place statues in turn order in a round, 1 space at a time, and that continues until all players can no longer place. An important side note: when a player uses a tile that has more resources on it than they actually need in order to construct the statue, they don't receive change. Instead of receiving change, you receive follower tokens for each of the excess resources that you spent. However, you can only do this when actually building a statue. So if you have extra resource tiles left over that don't add up to actually allowing you to build a statue, they're just garbage. They get thrown away at the end of the round.
Very important.
Once all players have finished building, turn order is reevaluated, again based on the number of followers that each player has. The player who has crowned the new king/queen gives up 5 followers to obtain their title, but they also get to place a statue, sometimes more than 1, depending on the round, in the next available spot in the halls of history, leaving their legacy, so to speak. Lastly, whichever player or players have the least statues constructed receive the mercy of the people, which allows them to flip over a token that gives them an advantage for the next round, granting them the ability to subtract 1 from each of their resource totals after the Great Greedy Crab, which reduces your chances of getting nailed with a tumult. The game ends again when either someone has built all 25 of their statues or once a gradually shrinking game trigger fires, which is determined by the gap between the leader and the player in last place. And the most ignominious statues constructed wins the game.
Good job, Jason.
Do you have any critiques for me, Bill? Anything I can do to, spice things up a little bit?
That a 4 on a game of 1 to 6, so that was pretty good.
All right. Okay, well, this is the first game in a little while that we've done that has a real-time element, I think. And it's not only real-time, but it's real-time push your luck.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
How did you guys feel about that in this game? What did you think about that mix of the push your luck and the real-time? 20 seconds isn't a lot of time.
No.
No, it's not.
As I quickly found out.
I will say, as the senior member of the group, it's interesting because you spend an amount of time thinking about where your pieces are on the board, what resources you need, and you need to hold that in your brain while in real time just scrambling like heck to get what you need. I will say, for me, if I was trying to do anything other than, I'll say 2 buildings, because there were times I was trying to do more than that, which was probably way, way aggressive.
Yeah.
I would just kind of lose track of what I had versus what I got versus whatever. So anyway, it was hard as an old person in my short-term memory in this real-time push your luck to just do that math in this fast, hectic kind of tile grab. But anyway, it was also kind of fun. What did you think, Chris?
Yeah, 20 seconds definitely not a lot of time. It is frantic. It is hectic because it is a short window of time. I think that's all good. It should be. I don't think for what this game is trying to do, you should have a whole lot of time to think about it. But at the same time, I do think there was a really interesting, subtle design choice that I think it really makes a big difference in how the game plays out. The amount and the distribution of the bread, the tools, and the stone is the same between all 3. Okay, there's the same number of each type of tile with the same distribution of symbols on the tiles.
Right.
But before the grabbing starts, every player takes 3 tiles out of the pile randomly. You don't see what you're taking out. And basically what this does is it is making the distribution of the things in the face-down pool different every time.
Right.
So in other words, one pool, there might be a lot of stone in there because the things that we randomly pulled out were tools and bread. Whereas in another one, there might not be very much stone because that just happens to be what we pulled out randomly. And so what this causes you to do in the time that you're able to do it is you have to kind of look at a whole bunch quickly to decide how greedy you feel like you can be. Because if you're not seeing a lot of stone when you're flipping it over, that should be telling you, okay, that a lot of them probably got pulled out.
Right.
And I could get burned here if I grab too much. Where if you're seeing a bunch of them, you're like, well, I could maybe be a little bit more greedy here.
Or the other players at the table just happen to pick them all already up.
Right. But it does give you a little fractional additional thing to think about. You're not just looking for what you need. You're also trying to assess how much of this thing do I think is actually on the table and what can I get away with. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was going to say in that.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. There's just a lot of variables that you're trying to factor in. You're trying to figure out what you need. You're trying to figure out your fallback plan if you can't get what you need. You're trying to figure out how many things are on the table, how greedy can I be. You're trying to figure out, okay, what am I actually trying to build and how am I going to jump in front of somebody else on the map. It's just a lot to process in 20 seconds. And a lot of times I ended up just being like, well, screw it. I'm just gonna grab what I think I can grab and hope that it adds up to something that I can actually do something with.
What?
And that didn't pan out well most of the time. But,
well, I mean, that's
tumults are not uncommon.
Right. I mean, to me, I mean, it's funny, Chris. You're saying that like you have this ability to search the tiles on the table and do some sort of calculus on there.
Well, I was trying.
Oh, yeah. No, and I appreciate that because, I mean, I had a game where I didn't do that and I did really well, and I had a game where I didn't do that and I lost horribly. But I appreciate that's what you do in a perfect world, but it is funny when you start looking at the tile and you have the recipe in your head. What you kind of start with is, I need this, let me put it in my recipe file. I need this, let's put in my recipe file. But the fact that the resources are not balanced, and especially the fact that you need stone, and I know you're going to go there.
We got to, but
right, but that it becomes this real angsty moment of, do I not keep this because I know I'm not going to get it anyway, and look for my stone so that I can at least complete an order, right?
Yeah.
Kind of situation. So
the other factor in all of this that I think is interesting to talk about is, because the resources are numbered 1, 2, or 3, right? When you flip over a bread tile, it either has 1 bread on it, 2 bread, or 3 bread on it.
Right.
There's another factor here, because the way that you actually claim turn order is by overpaying for your buildings, essentially, right? And so not only are you trying to get what you think you can get, but you're also like, okay, well, I only need 2 stone, but if I pick up a 3 stone, I can pay with that and I'll get a follower.
Yeah.
But if I pick up 3 stone, is that too many stone?
Right.
Or if I put this 3 stone down, am I going to find another stone that's a 1 or a 2 before somebody snags that one? So it's like, yeah, you're constantly back and forth trying to make those calls.
Yeah, the overpaying, again, if your brain can process all that in 20 seconds, it's a lot, right? But I think it's another little extra wrinkle that I totally agree. Gives you some control, I think, over where you fall in turn order, which matters because we haven't talked a whole lot about the board part, the game board part, but being able to make sure you can go before somebody in this game can be good at times, because you and somebody else might be adjacent to a city where you can get a whole lot of statues down, and if Jason gets what he needs and I get what I need, the person who's going to reap the benefits, if we're both adjacent to that city, is whoever's first.
Right.
And the person who's first is probably the person who is overpaying, right? So you want to overpay. But like Jason said, it's also risky because the more resources you take, the more susceptible you are to getting dinged with that tumult, right?
Right. So it's funny because, I mean, in the games that we played, one game that I played, I was absolutely looking for the minimum to fulfill the recipes, I guess. And I ended up winning, but it really, in the second game where I tried to do that same strategy, I ended up losing out to, I think, Jason a bunch of times because he was ahead of me. And it's just fascinating to think about what is your strategy when you're trying to set your mindset to go into this real-time, frenzy of what you're going to grab.
Right.
Because it's super important. Is like, how am I thinking as I attack this?
Totally.
So I feel like we should talk about tumults, right? Did you guys feel like the penalty matched the crime in terms of a tumult? Did you feel like it was too harsh, the penalty that you would take for being the greediest player? Did you think it was not harsh enough? I think I have mixed feelings about this. Maybe this is because I got hit with it a bunch of times the first time we played. Bill, you were being really aggressive on a few plays that one game and you kind of got away with it. I would argue, and this is not a ding against you, but I would argue that you didn't necessarily plan for that to happen. You weren't like, oh, this is definitely safe. I can take all these things.
Man, I was strategizing all over the place. What are you talking about?
Because we were being more skittish in our first game.
Right.
Because we didn't know what we were doing. I think we all collectively got more aggressive in the second game, which penalized the most aggressive person, which was usually you.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure that was like a genius play on your part, that you just like knew that you could get away with that. As opposed to like, I feel like I got hit with a few of them where like I wasn't really trying to push my luck. I was just trying to get some stone, and I got some stone and I still got hit with the penalty. And it felt really harsh because it hurts to get hit with that.
Yeah.
Like, it can make it to the point where you can't build anything for a round. And
it makes you scared to grab too much.
And that's a death sentence. If you can't build anything for a whole round, that can really, really hurt you.
Oh, yeah.
Not to mention the fact that you're losing followers.
Yeah.
So now your ability to regain turn order has just been knocked down too. So, yeah, I go back and forth on it. I admit that I am not great at figuring out what I needed to pull in this game. But even if you're trying to be conservative, you can still get nailed with it. And that happened to me a few times, and it kind of just left a bitter taste in my mouth.
Dislikes Chris because I know he's chomping at his microphone.
We've all talked about this a little bit. I'll try to explain this in a way that is clear and makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about the ingredients that you need to build a statue on the different terrain types, right? It's all different depending on what you build on, with one exception. So for about 2/3 of the terrain types, you need bread. For about another 2/3, you need tools. But for every type, stone is required.
Right.
Stone is required for everything. And because of this, stone is the rate limiting component, really. So in other words, what I mean by that is if I get as much stone as I feel like I can get or can safely take, it doesn't matter how much bread or tools that I acquire beyond that. The stone is always going to limit what I'm able to build on my turn because I can't do anything else with excess tools or bread if I don't have more stone.
Right.
And so what invariably started happening, especially in our second game, is stone would either tumult or come very close, hit right on the money, and there would always be an excess of bread and usually tools, not always, because tools are often needed for the higher level stuff, but bread always. There was a ton of bread always sitting in the middle of the table. And it always just felt unsatisfying. To me, I don't understand the logic in making stone required for everything and make it at the rate limiting step when you could have used some of the other components more interestingly to where that didn't happen. So in other words, why not have a terrain type where it just requires 2 bread or a bread and a tool? Then that grabbing for bread and tools would have been more interesting instead of a whole bunch of bread and tools sitting in the middle of the table and we're like, well, I've got as much as I can do with the stone I've got, and now I just sit here. Actually, in the second game, there were several times I sat there for like 5 seconds waiting for the clock to run out because I was like, well, there's nothing else I can take because I don't have the stone, and there's no stone to take. So, I don't know. That was just a huge misfire, in my opinion, from a design standpoint.
Yeah. I had similar thoughts. I think you solved it in one particular way, which is make more options available. I think the other thing would be allow swapping of resources or something, right? Like
turning 2 bread for a stone or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that also helps to alleviate the issue where you screw up and you miss grabbing one tile and now your entire round is screwed, right? Or you get hit with that tumult. And I mean, I guess the penalty is supposed to be harsh. It's supposed to be, well, you were greedy, so you don't get to build anything this round. But if that is enough of a impact to your game that it more or less knocks you out of the game, which I would argue that it's close. Because the catch-up mechanism, which we can talk about in a second, I would argue is not that strong. And so it would give you that just a little bit more flexibility. Like, make it hurt, right? Like, make it like, well, you got to pay 2 for 1 or something, right?
Or 3 for 1
But you still have the ability to cobble together something. And you're not just throwing away 5 resource tiles that you can't do anything with because you didn't get a stone or you didn't get enough stone.
And you're still engaged in the grabbing phase, you know?
Right,
It just felt so weird to me to sit there and us staring at a bunch of stuff we knew was bread and everybody's like, well, just going to sit there because we don't need it, you know?
I find it hysterical that you guys are wanting warm fuzzies. You capitalistic people over there. It's like, give it to me. It's like, well, the market doesn't. It's all right.
I'm asking for more tension, actually.
No, you're asking for something to alleviate the fact that
No, you're misunderstanding me. I want there to be more tension about how much bread can I get away with grabbing here.
Well,
because
yeah, but
I think I was arguing for what you're saying, Bill, a little bit in my solution to that problem, but I agree with Chris's solution to the problem too, which would
I wanted to feel more stress over grabbing more bread, and I never felt stressed about bread because bread literally never tumulted ever.
Exactly. So if you had the solution where you can turn in bread for stone, kind of thing, like I'm going to grab 3, and you've like searched the board and you see there's 7,000 bread out there and there isn't anything there, then that's not tension.
But then you would be over the tension over, well, everybody knows bread is more valuable now, so everybody's grabbing it more. Am I going to grab too much? That was never a concern in the game.
Maybe.
Yeah, it would add tension to the other resources, where stone was really the one that primarily had tension.
All anybody cared about.
Right, exactly. So I mean, to me, as far as the grab part of the game in the 20 seconds is, I knew I was grabbing stone, and I would pass over stuff so I could get my freaking stone. I could
that's
do
why
it.
you got dinged so many times in the second game.
Oh, well,
for
true.
grabbing 7 stone in one round.
That's true. But I mean, I think I would get better. But I don't know. To me, it's I can see the design decision that if somebody's playtesting this over and over, and we're having this kind of discussion, that they can make an intelligent decision at the end of it, saying, yes, let's limit the stone because we want to create that market tension around stone. We're not going to trade it in. And yes, you might have some rounds where of the 12 or 9, or depending on how many players are, you take out of the game, there might be a bunch of stone that's out. there might not be. There might be a lot of stone in there.
Well, forget about the trading mechanic, right? Leave that out, right? You could still do something that makes bread more valuable that would enable it to have tension around it, right? That doesn't alleviate the tension on stone.
Like, to me, why couldn't you build on forests instead of using stone? Why not make it like 2 bread and a tool or something like that?
Well, because it's
why does stone have to be in everything? Because if it wasn't, like, we were seeing building 1, maybe 2 statue or on 1 or 2 terrain types at the most every round because of the rate limiting of the stone. If you design it in that way, you could maybe get away with 3, maybe even 4 if you really were grabbing and being aggressive. But
which might actually up the tension, because then somebody who's fallen behind can actually have a chance to catch up. Right?
Building on 3 terrains with the way it's designed now is nigh impossible unless your opponents are playing stupidly. And 4, I would argue, can't happen.
Right.
If you redesign it that way, that would become much more of a real possibility.
You're talking about trading in
No.
resource for.
I'm saying making the ingredients for certain types of terrains different. Not requiring stone, but requiring combinations of bread and tools in some way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I feel like the design of the way that it is still valid in its way, but I could see where that would make it a different game, but it could also be in some ways better. Yeah.
Okay. You ready? Your turn, Jason. You want to kick us off here?
Yeah. So we didn't really talk about theme much, but I will say the theme is pretty dead on in this one.
It is.
It's goofy, wacky even.
Yeah.
I tried to capture a little bit of that in the flavor text, probably pretty terribly. But, I mean, I kind of like the theme.
Yeah,
I like the crazy nobles. You know, it's obviously reflective of a poor time in history. But, you know, if taking it for the lighthearted spin that they're trying to put on it. Yeah, I like the greediness aspect, trying not to be too greedy, trying not to get chased down by the angry peasants.
Erecting statues so they can worship you.
Yeah, erecting statues to yourself all over the place. I thought that was funny and pretty cool. The greed mechanic, along with the push your luck and the real-time stuff, is pretty unique. I haven't played a game like that. Personally, I'm not good at the time pressure-y, figure it out in limited amount of time type of games. It's not a preferred mechanism for me. It doesn't make this a bad game on that merit alone. There's plenty to think about: how much resources you're going to grab, where you're going to build next, how to make sure you can overbuild and gain followers and trigger that clutch king-queen grab at the right time. Based on the design alone, I would be stuck between a 3 and a 4 again, unfortunately. But for me, I had to settle on a 3 again for some of the concerns that we've outlined. I think that you can get unintentionally, like not even being greedy, you can just get nailed with the tumult and it knocks you out of the game. And so for that reason and some of the others that we've discussed, unfortunately, I fell on a 3.
All right. For me personally, these type of games are not my wheelhouse or what I necessarily like either. Similar to you, Jason. I can't really think of any real-time speed games that I like. So at baseline right now, I'm kind of sitting at 3, and now impress me. Now, having said that, I'll play any game once. I like the idea of this game. I think it has a lot of interesting things going on that I hope that we outlined in the pros section of our talk. I think there's some interesting ideas here with the components or ingredients that are needed and trying to figure out how much you can take without getting penalized. I think all that's good. The stone thing just absolutely killed this game for me. I think that was just a really bad choice in design judgment. And I hate to say that because I know it's Klaus Teuber. I mean, I know. But I'm entitled to my opinion, and I think this was a huge miss. Basically what I'm saying is I think there's interesting things going on here, but this game could have been so much better, I think, with some retooling with some of the rules. I really do.
Put a little Catan in there.
Yeah, right. It just missed the mark. And so for me, I'm actually going to give this a game of 2. I didn't like this game. I didn't enjoy it. Again, I'm not inclined to like games like this, and I feel like there were a couple of design choices that were just nails in the coffin for me. So I would say only if you like the style of game is it worth a go. If you don't, I don't think this game's going to change your mind. It's just total pass for me.
Maybe hex tiles instead of square tiles.
Instead of square ones, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, there certainly is a lot of randomness in the push your luck part of this, with the fact that you're pulling out 12 tiles and you have no idea what's in the middle. And to me, being the old guy at the table, it's hard for me to hold a lot of stuff in my brain at the same time. So the real-time part of it was just hard. I totally was really aggressive in the first game that I played. The following games that we played, I was a train wreck for me. Whether it was randomness or just the fact that that's just not something that's going to work for you every time kind of thing. But it was kind of fun just, again, for the people I was playing with. I am not a big fan of push your luck games. And again, I'm like Chris, I'm not a big fan of real-time games just because I don't feel like I process things really quickly. But if you like games like this, I could see you enjoying it. I mean, there's some thought processes that go into it, and I can easily see there being a group of people out there that would like it. And to me, I think this could be one of Klaus's good games, I guess, in the right circle. But I'm going to give it a 3. Unlike with Jason, it's not something I want to necessarily play again. I sort of enjoyed the games that we played, but I don't necessarily agree necessarily with Chris about the stone. I think there is a market thing going on. Yes, I think you could house rule it maybe, or maybe there could have been something that you could have said about trading in resources, but I also appreciate the fact that stone was limited, and that was part of the angst of looking in the middle and deciding what you could get and couldn't get. And the fact that there was 7,000 breads out there versus stone, to me, could be part of the game. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'll give it a 3.
All right. Well, some varied thoughts there on that one. Tell us where we can find it, Chris.
I'm waiting for the question. Yeah, so there are several very affordable copies available on Noble Knight, our sponsors. Again, we would love it if you would use them to purchase your copy if you're interested. Again, our discount code is GEMS10 off for 10% off your order, and also 25 copies on the BGG Marketplace.
Did you get a price for what it would cost?
On Noble Knight?
Yeah.
I think they were like in the 15 to 20 range.
Oh, man, for $30 you could get 3 games.
There you
man.
go.
I've been telling you.
Yep.
Awesome.
Good deals.
Awesome.
All right.
And those are our thoughts on Tumult Royale.
Nice. The king tarries in a far-off land. In his absence, the kingdom falls into chaos and disorder. Each duke seeks to build up his own power and influence. Borders will be redrawn, the kingdom divided. Who will control the most valuable regions when the king returns?
Awesome,
the classic Chris Batman voice.
He is my hero.
That's awesome, Chris.
All right, Domaine, also known as Lowenhertz, published in 2003 by Cosmos, Mayfair, Piatnik, 999 Games, and several others. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1,141. This is a solo designed by Klaus Teuber. Brief rule summary for Domaine. Domaine is a confrontational area control game where the players are trying to enclose their castles within large domains via the placing of walls in order to score the most points possible. The game board in Domaine is made up of a randomly generated array of 9 4x4 square tiles. Each 4x4 square tile is made up of some kind of assortment of meadow spaces, forest spaces, village spaces, and mines, with the one tile in the center of the board also having the royal city. Each player's supply consists of 3 or 4 castles, depending upon player count, and 15 knights. All right, so before I get into the rules, I need to talk about how you complete the setup, and that's how you place out your castles. So at the start of the game, in turn order, every player is going to place out 1 castle at a time on a vacant meadow space on the board. So I'll place one and then Bill, then Jason, then it comes back to me and I place my next one. However, it's important to note that when you're placing your castles, each castle that you place has to be 6 spaces away from a castle that you have previously placed of your own color. Okay, so this is prohibiting you from getting too close to yourself, which if you're able to do so, you could synergize with yourself pretty powerfully. So that is why that rule is in place. However, it's very important to note that there is nothing hindering you from placing your castle any number of spaces away from one of your opponents. And as a matter of fact, You can drop your castle right next to your opponent, if you so choose, and get right in their face right from the get-go, which does happen in this game.
Yeah, Chris, it does happen.
Jason did it to me last game. In addition to your castle, when you place your castle, you'll place one knight adjacent to your castle as well. More on knights and how they work later. Once the setup is complete, each player will draw a hand of 3 cards, and the game begins. On a player's turn, you can do one of 2 things. You can either play a card from your hand to use its printed ability, paying its required ducat cost, or you can sell a card from your hand to the Chancery in order to obtain more ducats. Let's begin by talking about selling cards to the Chancery. So again, as I mentioned, every card has an action associated with it, but also has 2 numbers on it. A cost to play the card, but then also a number in brackets, which is the sell cost. If you sell the card to the Chancery, you get that amount of money in ducats, but now it is in a face-up display from which all of your opponents can now, when they replenish their hands, take that card that you put there and put it into their hands, because you can't sell a card to the Chancery and then pick it back up on the same turn. You could pick it up on a later turn if it's still there. All right, so let's talk about the second action. The second action that a player could take is playing a card by paying its cost, again in ducats, and then executing its printed action. So let's go through the 5 different types of cards. So first, there's the Place Borders card. So this can let you place anywhere from 1 up to 3 borders or walls or fences, however you want to think about them. And these are little black pieces that basically go along the edges of each square and create partitions or boundaries between players' adjacent territories, basically. Okay. I guess before I go on, I should explain what a territory or a domain is. So if you're able to completely fence in your castle to where it's completely surrounded by walls or the edge of the board or some combination thereof, and it doesn't contain either any more of your castles or an opponent's castle, you have created a domain at that point. Domains are important because when you create a domain, that will score you points. For every forest that is in your domain, you'll score a point for that. For every village in your domain, you'll score 3 points for that. If you have the royal city in your domain, of which there is only one, you will score 5 points for that right away, immediately. In addition, if you have enclosed mines in your domain, you will get money for that. So the way mines work is there are 4 different types of mine: gold, silver, bronze, and copper, I guess.
Diamond?
Or no, that's right, yeah.
Diamonds.
Gold, silver, diamond, and copper, I guess. It's 4 different kinds, okay?
Wheat, sheep,
yeah,
bricks.
For each
stone.
unique type of mine that you possess in all of your domains, you'll get 1 ducat at the start of your turn. So it's like an economy. So that's good. In addition, if you are able to enclose 3 of the same type of mine across all of your domains, you'll score 5 points for that when you accomplish that. Okay. That's a lot about placing borders, but you need to understand how domains work. All right, what's the next action? Knights. Playing a knight card will let you add more knights adjacent to your castles or previously placed knights. So why are knights important? Well, let's talk about the next action, expanding your domain. Okay? So when you expand your domain, you can cause your fenced-off area to creep into adjacent areas, either up to 2 spaces in one direction, or you can go like 1 square in one direction and 1 square in the other direction. However, you cannot expand into an opponent's neighboring domain unless the number of knights in your domain exceeds the number of knights that is in their domain. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why knights are important. So what's the way you can combat this? Well, the 4th action is the Deserter card. This is a pretty mean card. If you play this, you remove a knight from a neighboring domain and you add a knight to your domain. It's like a guy is turning sides and joining your forces and abandoning your opponents. And then the 5th and final action is the Alliance. What this lets you do is turn a wall between one of your domains and a neighboring domain sideways, and this denotes that you can no longer invade into them and they can no longer invade into you in those particular 2 domains. All right. After the player has executed their action card, they will redraw back up to 3 cards, again by either taking a face-up card from the Chancery or a blind draw from the top of the deck. The game will end immediately once a player hits a predetermined number of points based on player count. However, if the draw deck runs out before a player has reached that predetermined number, then the winner will be the player with the most points once the deck runs out and the players have played all the cards out of their hands. And that's generally how you play Domaine or Lowenhertz.
Good job, Chris.
All right. So when we review games, we try to, as best as we can, come up with new, interesting questions to talk about when we're reviewing a game. Sometimes that's easy. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's hard. In this particular instance, I think it was pretty easy because I want to talk about an aspect of this game that we often don't talk about in games. But I do think it's pretty important in this particular game, and that's the setup. And not necessarily the setup and how the board is constructed before the players start doing things, but there's an important part of setup in this game where you place your castles on the board. Mm-hmm. How did you all feel about this aspect of the game? Did you find it important? Did you find it challenging? What are some things that stuck out to you in the actual setup of this game where you place your castles before we start playing cards?
Yeah, I mean, I think this part is critical. This game reminded me a lot of Terra Nova.
Yeah.
We brought up that comparison a couple times going through it. Mm-hmm. The whole fencing off of areas and the initial placement in Terra Nova is critical also, right? Determining where you're going to place your people. As you're placing your people, you're already starting to sort of fence off little areas in your mind of like, okay, well, if I can manage to fence off these, then I'll get this benefit, and then I can maybe rely on Chris to fence off this little section of this area over here because he's going to be incentivized to do that. So if he does that, then I can just fence off this little section. That'll help me get a domain. So I feel like that's half the game is trying to figure that out. And obviously, you can't control what's going to happen. But if you're not thinking strategically through those initial placements, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, the setup in this game just really fascinated me. I can't think of a game other than Terra Nova where I've thought so much about where I needed to put my starting pieces. And I would actually argue I think the setup is more critical in this game than in Terra Nova. Mm-hmm. Mostly because in Terra Nova, the only thing you're really considering is where all the other people are placing and where you can try to place to help yourself. In Domaine, the board is modular. The board is not modular in Terra Nova. It always looks the same. But in Domaine, the way that the square tiles get placed out to create the array of where everything is going to be different every game. And so you start thinking, well, do I place here? Because I think I can fence that off fairly easily, but maybe there's only one mine. Maybe I place over here where there's 2 or 3 mines, but that's harder to enclose, and am I going to end up fighting somebody for that space? But maybe that's not so bad, because like Jason said, if somebody's building walls there, they're kind of building walls for me, right?
Right.
That's an interesting part of this game, is that if somebody is near you building walls, they might be trying to fence you off, but you share that wall. So in effect, they're kind of helping you in a way. They might be fencing you out from what you want, but at least they're building a wall that you can continue on and enclose yourself, right?
Right.
There's just so many things to think about, right? Like, how do I get a varied number of mines so I increase my economy, but I kind of want to have a placement to where I can try to grab 3 of one mine, right? So I can get those 5 points. So many things to consider and think about before the first card is even played, right? Which I think is great. Yeah. Oh, that was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the choice of once you're in the game, after all that has happened, there's always this tension because you have 3 or maybe even 4 castles in a 3-player game. You can't fence in all of them. Like, you just don't have the resources. So you have to figure out, okay, which areas do I need to focus on? How do I balance that up against what my opponents are trying to do against me? Which castle maybe do I need to just abandon and just be like, that one's, whatever happens to that happens to it. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to deal with it, right? Because I need to focus on these other ones over here and really make sure that they're worthwhile. I really liked that tension, trying to figure out where to focus. And you're constantly watching your opponents of like, okay, well, Chris started building a wall there. Like,
right.
Like, I can either latch onto that or I can ignore that for now and I'll focus somewhere else because he's going a different direction than I thought maybe he would. It's very dynamic in that sense, and I like that part of it.
A castle you might otherwise have just been ignoring. As the game evolves, you might look over and you'd be like, oh, shoot, now I only take like 3 walls and I can close in that area just based on how other people have been laying walls, right? And opportunities can arise for you as the game progresses.
Yeah. So it's funny. We sometimes talk about games that have good beginning, middle, and end game segments to it. This one was kind of funny in the fact that the beginning placement was so important, and that first 2, maybe 3 turns are super important, but the rest of it felt kind of the same, to me anyway, on how the game evolved because of who was engaged in conflicts with each other, with night placement, with what walls are happening. I thought it was very cool in that aspect, is you just had to pay really close attention on what everybody else was interested in and see what opportunities just presented yourself mid-game.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you said. You were saying it didn't feel samey to you, the different phases.
Well, how do I say this? It had a strong beginning feeling.
Yes. Okay, right.
And then the mid game almost felt like the same all the way to the end, right? I don't know if it necessarily had a hard transition point to the end game.
Interesting.
I mean, I have to think about that a little bit further.
I maybe slightly disagree. I did feel like there was a clear beginning, middle, and I felt like there was a clear end, because I do feel like once you get to like the last third, the game gets real sharp. Because everybody's got their domains, and you're invading into each other. You can chop people's territories in half and just wreck them. And that doesn't really happen in the middle and the beginning because the domains aren't developed enough. But once you get to the last third of the game gets real sharp, I feel like. I mean, it can get painful even.
No, you're 100% right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. That's true.
One other thing I wanted to mention was the Chancery. I thought this was really interesting. This was another great point of pain for me in the best way possible. Because money is pretty tight in this game, especially early, and especially if you're sucking at mines, which I did the last time we played this game. If you're really short on money, you have to sell cards to the Chancery to get money to do things. Mm-hmm. And you really start to begin to feel the agony of, am I really going to lay this card down here for this money that I definitely need, knowing that somebody is going to pick that card up and use it to punish me thoroughly in the next couple of rounds.
Right.
That tension was real for me. Like the trader card and even the alliance card. Like you could be building up a big army with the intention of invading, and then you sell that card and somebody picks it up and forms an alliance between you. You're like, dang it.
Yeah, I like the variance in the cards. This kind of somewhat ties into what you were saying. In that the last game we played, Bill, you were struggling because you were not getting wall cards early on in the game. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, man, if you just randomly, you're not drawing wall cards, are you screwed in this game? And interestingly, you nearly won, and probably should have won that game. Mm-hmm. You forgot a rule at the end that would have allowed you to easily win. So I credit you with the win on that game, not myself. But I mean, the fact that you drew nearly no wall cards for the whole first half of the game, and the deck is in stages, so it's deliberately set up so that most of the wall cards are at the beginning of the game.
Right.
So the fact that you didn't draw any at the beginning is astounding, but also it means you're probably not going to find many more because there aren't many left in the deck.
Yeah.
The fact that you were able to come back from that and win the game shows that there are varied strategies in this, because you can, to a degree, I mean, you need to control it a little bit, but you can basically wait on your neighbors to build walls, right? And invest in knights. Make sure that your domains are really strong and get a lot of those deserter cards and flip the script like real fast, because that's what happened to me. I had gotten a ton of wall cards. I was walling everything in. I had my economy going. Everything was great. And then Bill was over there hoarding the deserter cards. And all of a sudden, it's like boom, 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 boom. All my knights are gone, and they're all in Bill's domain. And now I'm like a sitting duck in the middle.
And I can't attack Bill because he allied between us. So now I'm attacking you, and Bill's attacking you. It spiraled out of control.
And that's my fault, right? I was like, man, all these wall cards, this is awesome. I'm going to rule the roost here. I get to do whatever I want. Where I should have been like seeing some of those deserter cards going through and not so quickly throwing them away and being like, I don't need those. I'll deal with that later, right? Because all y'all were snapping those up, and they're going to get played.
Yes.
So
I
like that.
Yeah. I want to quantify my beginning, middle, and end, because, Chris, I totally agree with you about the end. There is definitely a strong part of it. I guess maybe what I meant to say is there's a long, middle, meaty part of the game, I guess, before you get to the middle part of it. But to your point, Jason, about the game that you're talking about, one of the things I thought was also fascinating about that is I was setting myself up to invade your territory to pick up some nice, juicy cities in the middle of your domain. and you set up a treaty really early.
I allied with you. I was like, I see what you're doing over there.
Yeah, exactly. And I had drawn the cards. I was ready to take over both those cities, and you allied, and it was like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. But
that actually ended up hurting me.
Oh, exactly.
Because now I'm like, I need to gain points, and I need to attack Bill, and I can't.
Right. What was fascinating about that in the invading other domains and or setting up walls, I was kind of able to surround Jason's domain at that point and kind of box him in. And I was able to get a bunch of points because he couldn't attack me anymore, which was just a fascinating part of this game.
Totally. I'll kind of go back to something we were talking about earlier, and I just didn't have a chance to jump in. I wanted to save it for cons anyways. We were talking about the luck of the draw and drawing wall cards.
Right.
And how Bill was able to overcome that early in that game and make it really tight. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I will say I also was not drawing wall cards either. And I think it's because, Jason, you were just drawing all of them.
I had all of them.
I mean, you were drawing walls like crazy. I couldn't get them. I would say in the first few turns of the game, not drawing wall cards can really actually hurt you pretty significantly. I think the reason why it didn't hurt Bill as much is because you two were kind of synergizing. He was playing off of your walls because y'all were kind of building together, whereas nobody was really building with me necessarily. And I just hit a huge dry spell where I didn't get walls.
Right.
And then once I finally created a domain, I started expanding, and that's how the game, I think, overcomes it, in that expanding is like laying walls. You're laying walls when you expand. You're making your territory bigger.
Yeah.
But until you've made that domain,
I guess that's a good point.
You can't expand.
You can't do anything with all the other cards until you have a domain, and you need walls.
And it took me forever to make a domain because I wasn't getting wall cards, and you and Bill were kind of working off of each other. Maybe in a 4-player game this wouldn't be as much of an issue, but there's a little bit of a luck of the draw there. I'd consider that to be minor,
right? But
I think it does exist. You can get a bad start in this game.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that.
Yep.
The only thing I would mention, this isn't a con for me, but I think if this hasn't been made clear, you just need to understand this. This game is in your face. Okay?
That's mean.
So if you don't like that, you just need to stay away from this game. I mean, this game can get pretty darn harsh, especially in the later part of the game. It can get really rough.
I don't know if it's as mean as Terra Nova, but it's pretty mean.
Yeah, they're on par with one another. Maybe not quite as sharp, but I think with this game, as opposed to Terra Nova, there's a lot of, what do you call it, Bill, loss aversion? Because in this game, you can gain something and then lose it. I didn't explain it in the rules. I guess I should mention it quickly, but if you fence in an area and score points, and then that area gets invaded into, you lose those points.
Right.
It's not like I score them and I keep them whether somebody invades into me or not. If somebody invades into my village, I lose 3 and they gain 3. That's a 6-point swing.
Yep.
And stuff like that happens in this game often.
Right.
So you just need to be aware that if that doesn't sound fun to you, you should probably stay away. Some people are like, that sounds great to me. And I think a lot of our listeners like stuff like that, but you just need to know.
Yeah. That's funny you mentioned that. Are you ready to get the final thoughts?
I think so. Do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
So it's funny because Chris, I think, when he introduced us to this game, he says, okay, guys, remember, we're friends here before we start this game. And we all need to remember and agree that we're going to be friends at the end of this game.
We're not going to send the apologizing text in the morning.
Exactly.
Sorry, I was such a jerk last night.
Right. And I didn't fully appreciate that until I got to the end of this game because, there is a lot of this stuff. And I guess when we talk about the beginning, middle, and the end, one of the things I think that was kind of cool about this game is you can position yourself at the last 2 or 3 turns of the game to kind of have this coup de grace moment where you can invade somebody else's territory and make a big point swing, Chris, like you were just saying, that you subtract somebody else's city and you maybe even create another domain.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, you can chop somebody's domain in half. So you may only score 3, but if you cut off access to the other half of their domain through your invasion, you may have cost them 8 or 9 points.
Oh, yeah, right? Exactly. So there's just a lot of strategy and thinking ahead, especially at the very end. That is super fascinating in this game. And it's one of those games that lends itself that you go to bed at night dreaming about what you just did because you think about what you could have done differently at the end of it. So I liked it. I liked the fact that I was playing with a group of guys that were like, we all want to win and we all are going to like each other at the end. So that part of it was good. So my final thought is I give it a 5 because it was one of those things that I dreamed about at the end, and or I thought about things I could do differently that would have made my strategy better. So it's a pretty cool game.
Yeah.
Good job, Klaus.
Cool. Chris, why don't you go next since you've gone last?
All right.
Times.
Everybody, if you listen to this show, you know I like tension. And man, this game has tension in spades. So much so that I have to be in the mood to play this game, for sure. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just letting you know, if I didn't make it clear already, there's a lot of loss in this game. You're going to have things taken from you.
No warm fuzzies.
There's no warm fuzzies in this game, okay? But man, does this game have really, really interesting decisions. Just like Bill said, I couldn't have said anything better, and I totally agree with you. Every time I played this game, I learned something. Every time I played this game on the drive home to my house, I thought about something I should have done that I didn't do. I thought about it at night. All the things that I want to try next time. That is the sign of a good game. There's just so many clever things you can do, not just with your walls, but your knights and how they can block for you, and you can fence people. I mean, there's just things I've still yet to discover about this game. I'm convinced of that. And so because of that, I think this game is excellent. It's a great mix of strategy and tactics. We didn't talk about that a lot, but the game can be quite tactical at times. But there's also a good bit of long-term strategy in this game. Well, it's just a great mix. Basically, the game is excellent. I'm going to give this game a 5. I think it's well above average. Excited to explore it more. If you like a little bit of meanness in your games, like I said, I think most of our listeners do tend towards games like that, like Santiago, Terra Nova, things where you can get in somebody's face right away. I think this game is a game you should definitely check out. Excellent. I'm going to 5 as well.
Cool. Well, I won't beat around the bush on this one because you guys have pretty much summed up my thoughts as well. I'm giving this a 5 too. It didn't quite meet the standard that Terra Nova set when we reviewed that, so I'm not giving it a 6. I just think Terra Nova has a little bit more nuance to it. Maybe it's that abstract feel that it has, but there's definitely a lot going on here. Lots of awesome choices to make. I'll leave it at that because you guys have already said it, but 5 from me.
Awesome.
Yes.
5s all around.
5s all around. That's good. That's a great endorsement, people. If you're interested in picking it up, I've got good news. It is readily available at Noble Knight. Our sponsors, again, in case you missed it the first 2 times, that discount code is GEMS10 off. There are also 14 copies available on the BGG Marketplace. Check it out. It is good.
What's it cost? BG, you know?
I don't remember. I didn't write it down. It's not unreasonable.
Oh, cool.
Not unreasonable.
I'll have to look.
All right. And those are our thoughts on the very excellent Domaine.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Hidden Gems. If you like what we're doing here, please remember that it's a huge help to us if you give us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform, or follow us on one of our many social media platforms. Check out the BGG Guild or our Discord channel if you want to interact with us or share a game that you feel is a hidden gem. And if you're so inclined, please consider supporting the show over on our Patreon at patreon.com/hiddengemspodcast. Until next time, I'm your host, Jason.
It's Chris.
This is Bill.
Thanks for listening.
This episode of Hidden Gems, number 53, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on August 13, 2023. We love highlighting board game designers on Hidden Gems, especially designers that don't get enough well-deserved attention from the board game mainstream. So join us again next time as we highlight 3 games from the prolific yet underappreciated German board game designer Marcel André Casasola Merkel. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our Board Game Geek Guild is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Ghidorah. Our Discord channel is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Snoozefest. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Caitlin Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Caitlin Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 3874. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.
We are recording.
I guess we're starting about when we normally start.
Okay, we're not recording because Chris isn't ready.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just commenting on not having to wait for Cameron to type out all his flavor text. It's written on the piece of paper right in front of him.
Cameron
There's
does
something
have...
weird going on there that we have to talk about. I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? Just read from the paper.
This is all being recorded, and it's going to go in the bloopers.
I love you, man.
We'll
I'm
see,
sorry.
and we'll see if Cameron listens to the whole episode or not.
Okay. Are we still rolling?